How did you feel that experiment went last week? And did you bring him in for, who's the captain, sorry?
Ulrich, yeah. No, so it wasn't so much what Cameron got wrong or right. It was more just that combination of having Ludwig on flank, and this week having Janus back, who covers that role as well. I just felt it was, better for Ludwig to go to lock, and then that loose forward combination. I mean, as I said, it was nothing. I don't think that's the last time Cameron will ever play 6. He will play 6 again, and I'm sure maybe the combination will be different and the picture will look a little bit different. But it's also in hindsight, you lose that game and people think that it didn't work. If we'd won that game, people would have said it was fine. So it wasn't so much about what he did or didn't do. It was the fact that Janus is back, covers 7 and 4. If he goes to 7, then Ludwig doesn't need to be at 7 because he calls the lineouts, and then Ludwig can play lock. And while Ruan Nokia still got a hammy injury, the more exposure he gets at calling lineouts and in that position, the better for us as well.
And then in terms of the captaincy,
yes,
the communication with the referee and the likes, we were a bit outgunned there.
Yeah, that'll probably help with having Nizam. He's a bit older, but he's a captain. He's a bit wiser as well. And we spoke about that. It's interesting. On Monday, I spoke to Ulrich about it and just said, look, probably didn't get out of the game captaincy-wise what we wanted to get out of it. But, to be fair, you've got Conor Murray, who's played X amount of tests talking to the ref, and then Peter Omani talking to the ref, and then O'Donoghue talking to the ref. And, you can't really compare. Those guys have got mass amounts of experience. They know what to say, when to say it. That's one of the things that has been a secret of many successful sides, is how they can get into the referee, and I mean as in different times of the game with things they want to get through to the game. And they did it, much better than us, not for 1 minute underestimating the fact that we need more leaders on the field, but that will come. Ludwig's been a captain before, Nizam's been a captain, Ulrich's been a captain. When we get Ruan and Marcel back, that's 5 captains that we'll have on the field. A little bit like the box when I was coaching, I started off with John Smith, and then all of a sudden, Skalkberger became a captain of Province, Jean de Villiers became a captain of Province, Victor and Fourie captained the Bulls, and all of then we had so many more leaders on the field. So it's still a work in progress for us. And you're right, we're probably a little bit shy there on what we wanted to get out of the way we want to manage the game as a captain.
Jay? How do you feel about your day at 10? And by that I mean, do you feel you get exactly like for like whenever you have a situation like you do this weekend?
Well, Sim, to be fair, Goosen, there isn't like for like with him. He's obviously a guy who's played 13 for a French top club and won the top league. He's played fullback. There are not many fly halves. Maybe Damien would be the equivalent in another franchise that could go from 10, 15, 13, 12, I suppose, like Goosen can. And so it's very difficult to find that kind of guy to back up. But Chris has got his own strengths. He's calm, he understands, he studies the game, he's a good student of the game. He gets, him and Harold get on really well, talking about off and on the field. So there's a little bit of something there that also works for us. But Yaku, he's only been with us for a year. We've been together now for 4 seasons. This has basically been half a season with us. So he's still not where we want him to be. It's not his fault. I've spoken to him. We'll have enough depth and enough variation. One of the things that we want to try and get to, especially at 10, is that can cover more than one position. What I find is when you've got a guy that can play 2 different positions on your bench, you don't always have to take your 10 off. And if you look at the teams like Marnie doesn't come off, they've done well in URC. Owen Farrell doesn't come off for England. There's logic in it that the good sides leave their 10 there to play as much time at 10 as possible. And the guys on the bench can either play 10 or they can play another position. Like Damon McKenzie can come on at 10 if they need him to, or if he has to go to fullback, he can play fullback. While Mahanga stays at 10. Guys like Dan Carter didn't move. I know he played a few games at 12, but generally didn't take him off when they let him finish these games at 10. So we're not there yet. I mean, and that's something we're working on, is making sure that we have enough depth at 10, and as I said, some 10 that can play different positions as well, which gives us balance to our 23.
Obviously, these guys' result last weekend was a surprise, I imagine, for most South Africans. You guys played different games, the Stormers. What is it that you saw that could make them a threat for you guys?
I mean, look, they're not. I mean, I think to be fair, I mean, I think people are surprised because they won in Cape Town, and sides haven't generally gone there and won because it's been a tough place to win for any team. And credit to them, they played well. They probably deserved that win. But if you look at their results, I mean, they're all very close. It's not like people can blow them away, you know. Even we spoke to Munster afterwards, and I remember the Munster game. It was a real dogfight for a long period of time before Munster, you know, finished off the game and won it. They're very, you know, they stay in the fight, and they, as I said, they've been competitive. I think they've been the top. Again, I'm under correction, but I think they've been the top Welsh team in the last 3 seasons. Anyway, I think they finished top. Is that right? Finished top of their conference. So I mean, consistently, they have been the one team that have you know been the toughest to play against in all 3 years.
Coach, how is the mood been in the camp since Saturday's game? Did you get the reaction that you would wanted? Because I'm sure, I mean, the boys aren't used to losing at Loftus. So did you get the reaction that you wanted to see from the team?
The answer to that is I'll tell you tomorrow when the final whistle goes. You know, that's the answer. I mean, the reaction is irrelevant. People will be down in the change room. They'll, you know, obviously don't like losing, but the reaction is, that reaction is not important. The reaction is what happens in the 80 minutes tomorrow. That for me is the measurement of where we are as a group. So, you know, I can only answer that once I see what sort of reaction they have come the final whistle.
And you've spoken a lot about Giannis Kirsten, the addition, not being able to use it because of injury, now is finally back. How big of a boost is that? And how difficult is it for him to come back during what could be the business end of the season as well?
Well, look, let me say this. I mean, Giannis is one of those guys who's won the European Cup and the English Premiership, and there are not many guys that have done that. So he brings to the team in the back end of a competition where it's now knockout stages an incredible amount of knowledge, understanding, calmness. And there's another guy, might not be a captain, but he'll definitely have some leadership qualities on the field to help those youngsters as well. And you know, I've only worked with him now for a short space of time, but I can tell you that in his book, he'll know everything about the Ospreys. He would have known everything about the lineouts. He would have done his homework. He does it every week. You know, even though he hasn't been playing, he's an incredibly detailed guy, incredibly bright. And so the impact for me is, like you said, you know, what does it mean coming? I can only think for the youngsters, if he can instill what he knows and what he's learned and what he does in a week in his preparation to this group of players, then it's already added value.
Just the decision to move, coming back to win.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've tried the 13. Probably hasn't been buzzing there. It's not his fault. I mean, he hasn't given me what I thought. Harold has been tried and tested with Chris. They know each other well. As I said, they even play golf together regularly. So they've played together and they've trained together a lot. David can play 13, and then the back three have played for South Africa. You know, so it's not like, you know, Sebastian got a bang on the head. He's out this week, so that's been forced. In other words, he's not available. And he will go back to 13 again, I'm sure. You know, I'm sure I'll have to use him there at 13 again when Sebastian and Sergio Peterson and all those guys are available, Henry Millman. But for this week, it's got nothing to do with, you know, tactically or technically or whatever. I mean, I know how good he is. I know what a good rugby player he is. I've got to find a place for him. And with the way the setup of the team is now, you know, for him to go and play with Willie and with Kirtley in the back three is not, you know, we're not losing anything.
Just on your own question, just for the record, did you have a hearing this week?
Yeah.
Or did you plan to play personally?
Yeah, well, there's a thing called, I wish I had my phone here, but there's a thing called, I wish I had the name for it, but basically we accepted the fact that it was, you know, it was a red card, I think it's called an abbreviated process. Basically what that means is you send in your submission. We've got a report, and there I must say, guys, I'm glad you asked me, Kubus. I actually nearly forgot about it. I really want to explain to you that Craig Casey wrote a report, and he was the player who got injured. In other words, he's the player that got tackled. Incredible sportsmanship. I mean, the report he wrote was spot on. In other words, there was no agenda. He wasn't trying to nail anybody. He said he picked the ball up, he was going to pass it. He then changed his direction. He stood up because he saw Gerson coming. He said that Gerson didn't have any intent, wasn't coming to hurt him. It was just a rugby incident. And I say that to you because think about it. Munster and Bulls are vying for playoffs, and Munster and Bulls are vying to finish as high as they can. And they wouldn't be not aware of the fact that if Gerson gets 6-7 weeks, that's a hell of a thing for our campaign. So I can tell you, I was super impressed. Send him a message, send their team a message, because it shows why they're champions, why they won it. It shows why they're so high up in the competition, and why they're considered a great club. Because they were, I can't overemphasize that. When I read that, it was word for word what I saw. Ball popped out of the ruck. I was going to pass it. I saw him coming. I changed. I stood up. It was a rugby incident. He probably came off worse than me. These are words that he wrote. And we spoke afterwards, and I just think that shows real class.
Jake, within the context now of the log, you guys are still pretty much in control of your own destiny. How important is it again to just control and focus on your guys?
Well, last week, we all, let's accept, guys, last week wasn't something we wanted. We lost at home. You've got to win your home games. I've said it. You've got to get some away wins. So it wasn't ideal, but we played against a team that don't undervalue them. As I said, they're champions of the URC. They're consistently in the top of most competitions they play. I gave you that analysis or that stat, which is spooky. One guy's got 115 test matches, and he's 10 years older than the scrum half who's playing his 50th URC game. You look at Omani, and you look at Cameron Hanako, or you look at Ludwig, and you look at O'Donoghue. They got more test caps than these guys have got professional senior games. So we'll get there. We'll get there. I'm 100% sure that even if we had 15 men, we probably could have still won that game, and that's with the squad we have at this moment in time, experience-wise. So to answer your question, we still got our destiny in our hands. We still got 3 games at Loftus. There's still a lot of rugby. I'm sure you're all aware. There's a lot of rugby of teams that still got to play each other, that are close to each other. It's not a case of teams that are near us have got teams that are right at the bottom of the log. Like tonight, Ulster play Benetton, and that has an impact on, because someone's going to take points from someone. And then Connacht and Munster and Ulster still have to play Leinster, and those guys need those wins to finish in the top 8. So there's so many other intriguing situations that can happen. And while we can control winning at Loftus and obviously getting to the last game, where we know we still have got our fate in our hands, that's important.
How important will it be tomorrow to sort of dictate the terms of the game and not allow Ospreys to sort of slow down the match? How important is it to dictate?
Yeah, well, that's one thing last week, guys. I'm sure you saw, because you guys were here. The game was slowed down a lot, and it was a thing we got to communicate from the referees this weekend, and from Tupper, the head of referees, saying we need to be conscious of the fact that we can't have games going on like 150 minutes or whatever, because it kills into the TV time. We got to make sure that games, and we can't stop a serious injury. Obviously that takes time, but we can't have games that drag on because at every stoppage there's an injury. So it was something that the powers that be have spoken about. So, hopefully that'll count in our favour, because it's altitude, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it's hot. It's something that it's no different. It's not like it's a hidden tactic. When we go and play in Europe and it's freezing cold and it's raining and the wind blows one way in Connacht and you can't get out of your corner, that's the reality, So we've got to use our advantage, which is altitude, heat, soccer field, Sundown's playing tonight, so that field will be like a football field tomorrow. That suits us, because that's the kind of rugby we want to play.
Jake, I mean, we spoke a bit about guys being a bit naive in captaincy.
Yes.
But looking at it as well, Alric's stats last week were exceptional. I mean, he literally led from the front. I think top dominant carries and also tackles.
Yeah, it's funny, Brendan. He actually, I get the feeling he wants to be captain. And I mean that in a nice way. Sometimes you get kids that they sit in a class and they ask who wants to be class captain. You get some kids who, and I think he actually quite enjoys it. It's not like one of those things where if you make him the captain, then he doesn't do the other stuff. And I noticed that too with him. In other words, it wasn't in all the games that he's played and been the captain. He's actually been up front with a lot of things. So it's going to make us better. I mean, it is going to make us better if he wants to captain, and that means that even if he isn't captain and he feels as though he can add value, it's going to make us so much better. So you're right. You're spot on. Remember, Jean de Villiers was the same. Jean used to ask me every time I announced the Bok team, and I said, "John's the captain." He used to say, "And I'm the vice captain." So he used to pick himself.
Jake, just also Leo Cullen had quite a bit to say last week about squads, etc.
Yes.
And coming back to that debate a bit,
yes.
But I mean the way they've done it now, they could lose their top spot tonight or this weekend.
Correct.
Because Glasgow, etc. I just suppose it shows you the perils of how you've got to manage players in this one.
But, again, Brendan, I mean, I said to him, I went to see him, and in fact, he came to the hotel after the game and chatted, and I asked him, what did you do differently this year to last year? I mean, last year you won nothing, and I meant as in, you won so many games and ended up the campaign losing to La Rochelle and then lost to Munster in the semi-finals. So if you think about it, they got a 95% win rate last year in terms of weekly success, but they ended up winning no trophy. So I just asked him, how are you going to do it? What are you going to do differently? I mean, you can think about it. He's got Toulouse, still got to get through Toulouse. I know they've got Northampton, but I mean, Toulouse are a hell of a strong team in terms of championships that they've won. They too are managing their squad to win another championship. So you look at Leinster won it 4 times, Toulouse won it 5 times. The 2 biggest clubs in Europe could play each other in the final. Then, then they might not finish first, which means they might have to play away in a semi-final again, or of URC. And that just shows you, and again I say that because even their squad with incredible talent, with all the experience they have, are still trying to find a way in which they can juggle properly to make sure they get the best success in both. And I think what I appreciated about what Leo said was it is difficult. And I mean, I'm repeating myself, but if it's difficult for a guy with 32 internationals and guys that are coming from overseas that he's bought, you can imagine how difficult it is for a team still trying to find its feet in this comp, and also trying to find its feet with a really, really inexperienced group of players still. So he was spot on. I mean, he summed it up for everybody. I think that don't underestimate how tough it is to actually get everything right. And the margins are so small there. Let's be fair, Brendan. The margins are, you can get one right or both wrong, or you could get both right, and then all of a sudden you've got the secret to success. If they don't win anything this year, and I mean it, then people say, well, the model didn't work. If they go on and win both, well, then the model that they've got, that's the judgment or the sort of measurement that all the coaches are trying to find.
Ospreys won their last 2 games in South Africa. Munster also their last 2 games in South Africa.
Yeah.
I suppose in a way that there is a bit of a what's the word I'm looking for? Responsibility on your guys' side to make it difficult again for these, because that's something I think all South African franchises, you don't want it to become easy to win.
Well, I'll tell you what we really want is we want all the South African sides to start beating teams when teams come here as well. What we can't have is, and I'm not talking about this year, but what's happened in the past is teams have come here and beaten, like the Lions, or they've come here and beaten the Sharks this year. That doesn't help the pecking order, because what it does is they get away wins. And we know how tough it is to get away wins. So, but Brendan, there's so many now. It's 4 rounds left, and I mean, I'm so not confused, but I'm so aware of all the permutations that can happen. We win 4 games with bonus points, we could come first. But we could end up winning 4 without bonus points and come 6th. So. And I'm not sure on that stat, but what I'm trying to say is there's so many things that can happen. This team wins, that one doesn't win, that one, that one's got to play a game. I mean, you look at, for argument's sake, Connacht have to play Leinster in the last round a week after European Cup rugby. Is that a good or a bad thing for Connacht? Is it a good or a bad thing for Leinster? What happens if Connacht need to win that to be alive? You know, there's so many things. Stormers, Lions last weekend. I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, that's before I even talk about the Bulls. But there's so many permutations that could happen there. Lions could have to win in Cape Town to stay alive in the competition. So, but again, isn't that wonderful competition? I mean, that's what you want. You want the last weekend to go down to where teams can either stay alive or they're out.